This class in the title commitment class, I think, is one of the best classes as far as getting information. We did the title commitment class last week. So anybody that did not catch that class, I've got a recording on it. But you need to know and understand schedules A and C really well. B is a lot of promulgated language and a lot of this is the way it is, but do pay attention to that because that's also where your deed restrictions and easements and all of that are going to sit. Schedule C, you guys, from a review on a title commitment side, make sure that you're paying attention to schedules A. Everything should match your contract, including sales price. Lenders are going to pay attention to the loan amounts and make sure that matches. Make sure your buyer and your seller names all match up. So pay attention to schedule A, pay attention to schedule C. Now, from an appraiser's point of view, you guys don't see the title commitments. So oftentimes if things aren't matching on the appraisal side, we have to go back to the appraisers and say, hey, found out we got a different seller name than what you've got. So just know that it's important to pay attention to that. Next week, I will be gone, but we'll be going over closing disclosures, how to read and understand a closing disclosure. How many of you guys feel comfortable reviewing the numbers and how everything's calculated on a CD? Norman Gordon, I think. You are too, and Simone, I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, good, because the understanding those final numbers is super important so you can explain it to your buyer and seller, but also making sure that nothing's missing that needs to be on there. So we'll be sure that you guys thoroughly understand that. I will not be here next week. So Brandy or someone from the office will help facilitate that, but we will have Sean from Red River come and teach the closing disclosure. Sean explains the closing disclosure really well in layman's terms, but with a full understanding. So we'll have him cover that. So anybody who wants that class as a CE class, it also is CE. And then we have 1 week left after next week in this series, and that is Customers for Life. So one of the commitments that I had made in my business 3 years ago is to do a better job of staying in touch with my database and making sure that I am always available as a resource to them. Even, I mean, past the money part of it. I mean, I want to be a resource for them and continue to do business, not just that one transaction, but forever. And all their family members, all their friends. And what's really fun is when you get to do their kids' loans. But I also do it just because that's really, I mean, they need a trusted advisor on this side of the world as far as money and finances. And we really pride ourselves in being great financial advisors as well. I'm super thirsty. Will you get me some water? I know. But,
Wow.
I know, but
Wow. She takes care of me.
Today we're going to go over the appraisal part. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you guys, I asked Chris. Chris Green is an appraiser friend of ours. And I can legally say that. Now, I cannot call him and beat him up over value. I can't call him and harass him on a specific order, but I can ask him to bring me a cup of water or come talk to you guys today and answer y'all's questions. So there is that fine line. So you guys know and understand there's a love and respect in that relationship between lenders and appraisers. I'm going to get to our presentation in just a few minutes. I got to find it first. But I want to just make it really clear when we are covering that, what we can and can't say to each other from an industry regulation standpoint. But what I love about the relationships that we have, we've talked about it before, you've got to have good relationships with everybody that you're working with in a transaction because we are all reflective of each other. So if when you're in the middle of a transaction and you get frustrated because things aren't going your way, or the client gets frustrated because things aren't going their way, knowing and understanding the process and what's going on behind the scenes, and having a love and having a respectful, professional relationship with everybody that's involved in the transaction is really important. And it drives me absolutely crazy when people start the blame game when things aren't going well. They will a lot of times blame, oh my gosh, it's that surveyor is turning in the survey or late, and now we're going to have to extend closing. Or it's the appraiser there's always, or it's the lender's fault on this. Or if you know and understand the process and what goes on behind the scenes, then rather than do the blame game, as a professional, you can explain why it might be taking longer. Or pick up the phone and call that third party and say, hey, what is the challenge? What is the struggle? What is it I can help you with? Because when we're scared to pick up the phone because everybody's blaming each other, nobody wins. And it makes us all look bad. So knowing and understanding the industry well enough to explain or to know when to ask questions or what you can do to help makes us all better. Because at the end of the day, the buyer and seller are going to remember that transaction. They're not going to remember who did what, whose fault it was, unless you make a big deal of things. But if you explain and educate as you go, yes, it's an emotional transaction. Yes, they're going to act a little cuckoo for a little while. But at the end of the day, they just want the keys and they just want to move into the house. But how that process went is how we're all remembered. So we are all responsible for each other's reputation in a transaction, which is why I've always said it's really important that you guys choose who you're doing business with wisely. We're going to cover the appraisal part. I want you guys to know and understand when you walk up on a property, what might be red flags that, hey, this probably doesn't need to go FHA, or I'm about to list this property. So here's a list of what I need to make sure that the seller either addresses or realizes that it's going to limit the buyers that are able to purchase the property based on their decision not to make the changes to the property that needs to be made in order for it to qualify for a certain program. So you guys don't have to be experts at it all. You just need to know the basics to know when to ask questions and who to call in order to get a transaction closed and funded. I have asked Chris and Joshua to come because I got to tell a Chris story. Because relationships matter to us at our office. We want to know who are we doing business with and how well are we going to all work together. And a big part of that is how well do they communicate. We have to be able to communicate. So if I send a call, send a text, make a phone call, send an email, I need to know somebody's going to answer it and get back to me, because I got people waiting on me to have to deliver those answers, right? Same thing for you guys. Well, Chris came to our office a couple of years ago. He was just in town doing another order. I'm going to make up the story and he's going to tell me if my story's wrong. Or I'll just tell my version and it may be right or wrong. But anyway, he came by our office, and what really impressed us about Chris is that he knew and understood the relationship between appraisers and lenders. Yes, we are highly regulated, and we aren't supposed to communicate with each other based on the transaction until the report's delivered. And even once it's delivered, a loan officer has to be really careful. We're not supposed to have direct conversation with the appraiser about an appraisal. But there's the middleman. So the appraiser's got to have a really good relationship with the lender, but really the middleman. The middleman is the appraisal management company. And when we place an order, the order is dispatched to the appraiser. And then when the appraisal comes back, it goes through that middleman again, and they'll run a QC report on the appraisal. And so there's times when we get the report that we got to go back to the appraiser to make some modifications. Maybe we are looking on Schedule A of the title commitment and we notice that there's some, the appraisal is not 100% correct. We can have conversations with them in regards to that. But it needs to go through the middleman. So that whole communication and relationship is super important, because if we've got an appraiser that's not willing to talk to the middleman and have open dialogue, then you guys have a slowdown on your transactions in getting everything closed and funded. So relationships matter is the summary to that long story. So Chris came into the office. You could tell he's very customer service centric. It's very important to us. It is really high on our values, core values within the company and our branch. So we've been working with Chris for a couple of years, and that's one thing that I just appreciate about him, is his willingness to provide that level of service that mimics the level of service that we expect out of our office as well, or that you guys expect from us. And then I texted him last night.
I think so.
I texted him last night and I said, hey, I'm doing an appraisal class tomorrow. And I said that you'd be there. Will you come?
Thumbs up for sure. Sure that was the right thing. No, it was. Josh was like, yeah, reminded you.
So he's a real team player, even whenever I forget to ask him, weeks in advance. He's here today. I wanted you guys to be able to ask questions and to address any other questions or concerns that you guys have. Will one of you, Brandy or BJ, will you guys just email me the PowerPoint, because I don't want to search it. I'm being bossy today.
You need to be.
I need to be bossy, Peggy?
You're the boss.
Okay, all right. Or chat it. You can chat the link, actually. Let me turn chat on. For those of you guys on the call, please feel free to chat any questions that you have. If you have any questions for Chris, if you'll chat it, then I'll call on you and you'll unmute and ask the question. For those of you guys in the room, whenever you have a question, it's really best if you come up here, or I'm going to have to just repeat your question, because your question is probably a question someone else had too. But that's a big part of the class today, is the question part of it. So while I'm waiting on the PowerPoint to come, I just want to explain one more piece of the process. Whenever we are placing an order for an appraisal, each loan program has different ways of, like the VA loan, the appraisal is ordered totally different than it would be for conventional FHA and USDA, right? So all of those still have to go through appraisal management companies. Appraisal management companies have a list or roster of appraisers they work with. And everybody's requirements for being on that roster are different, as Chris and Joshua could tell you. So whenever you are doing business with a specific lender, the AMC that they use, the appraisal management company, and the roster matters. It really matters, because y'all's transactions are so, the appraisal part of that transaction is what keeps us up at night, right? And so if we have a panel of appraisers that don't respond to text, emails, or phone calls, when we got a problem, that's a problem. How many of you guys have had transactions where you had an appraiser on the other side of the transaction, you really wanted to ask questions, you can't get anybody to return any phone calls or explain anything? It's because of the relationship. It's the appraisers that the AMCs are allowing on the panel or on the roster to accept those orders. So when we say the lender matters, I really mean the lender matters. And the biggest part of that process is the appraisal part of the process. If you got a bad appraiser on the file, and maybe that's not a good word to use, but if you've got an appraiser that doesn't, in this area, what makes or breaks the appraisal, and Chris will nod his head on this one too, is the narrative. It's the explanations that they have to give for the comps that they've chosen or the comps they didn't choose. So a lot of times our appraisals come down to not just the numbers, but the explanation of the numbers. Because for some reason, you guys like selling these properties that are not one of a kind, that are one of a kind. And the narrative is going to be the determining factor whether or not that is going to be okay. Yeah.
How do you know? I mean, how do we, when we have a property to sell and the buyers come with these offers from different lenders, how do we know to tell apart a good AMC from a not so great? I mean, how do you?
Well, you
control
can't
it, but
control.
You can ask questions.
You can ask questions, but you're still not going to. Here's the challenge in our area that you have. So, and I'm not saying this to be biased. I'm saying this as a fact. We have very few appraisers that are familiar with the properties in our area.
True.
Right? I mean, we just don't have. We don't have that many Highland home neighborhoods.
Right.
We just don't. And because of that reason, a lot of appraisers from the Metroplex don't want to come down here often enough to get familiar with our neighborhoods. It's a long drive. You guys have got to realize these appraisers are not only just driving to the property, but once they go to the property, visit the property, walk through the property, do all of their field notes and measurements and all of that, they go back to their office and start putting an appraisal together and they go, oh crap, those comps that I thought were going to be comps after looking at the house, those aren't comps. So even if they had a list of comps and they drove by and took pictures of those comps on their way to the subject property, they get back to their office and go, oh, these aren't going to work. So now they got to go back out and go drive around and take pictures of the comps again, or the new comps. Well, if you're driving an hour and a half to get here for the first time, they're not going to want to come back and drive again to do the comps. So it is hard to find someone from the Metroplex that is good at what they do, that have clients they already work with, that are willing to come here. So if you're not working with a lender that has a roster of people local that are familiar with the area, or people like Chris who have come here often enough that is familiar with the area and is willing and committed to provide a service to his client, and his client is the lender, not you as the realtor, not the buyer. Their client is the lender. So if they don't have a lender that they enjoy working with, or that they're confident are going to pay them on time, then they may choose, hey, I got enough business. I don't have to mess with these other companies. So then what the other lenders, the big box lenders that don't have a local presence, don't have local relationships, are stuck with the appraisers that no one else wants to work with. And that's just, that may be, holy cow. I said that on Zoom, but it's true. The relationships you have with the relationships that the lender has with the appraisers make or break your deals.
Yeah, 100%.
What do you think the ratio is between,
That's a
really
question.
local appraisers and then having to come out of the area?
I don't know. Is there a report on that, Chris?
I don't know of any report where it does land.
I'll repeat the question just a second.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't know of a report, but what it really does land on is the lender you're using, because the lender can control who is on their appraisal panel.
Yeah.
So for example, our firm, like, it's not just me now. When I started, which super kind, it was just me. Now our office, we have an appraisal firm. We have, so we're staffed 15. Yeah, and we do maybe, like right now, we're doing about 120 to 130 appraisals per week. And then we actually have an appraiser that lives up here in Sherman. So when I say like that relationship, is what Michelle was saying.
Come up here,
Yeah.
Chris.
And this isn't easy. This is not. So it.
No, mean, really, we're not selling, we're delivering information and it's
No,
it's
but
fact,
to
it's
answer that
fact.
question, so how do you mitigate that risk, or like who you're gonna get? It really, especially in like a community in this area, yeah, if you go with someone like a guild or someone here local, if they've done their due diligence and have created that correct appraiser panel, like we have a gentleman, Mikey, he lives up here in Sherman. So even though we're Metroplex, we're Hall Park, Frisco, like I have individuals scattered where they need to be, and we're familiar with the area. So like the order would come through, like for example, like a guild. Well, you've got somebody who knows the market. You go with like a bigger box, and we do play in that realm because we're in the Metroplex. It's just you don't know who you're going to get, and that's just, we're more of a boutique firm. That's just not how we run our business. So yeah, it really depends like on the lender. So if you have like a unique property or something like
Barnuminium.
a barn dominium, don't do rocket mortgage. You know, like it just, and that's one of our clients too, because it isn't like, I think somebody said earlier, like a Highland home, you're in a cookie cutter neighborhood, you know, where it's semi-custom, but like you can find comps. A barn dominium, my
Yeah.
guy's gonna go out 20, 25, 30 miles. We're gonna produce an articulate, good product report. A big lender on the East Coast, they're just not gonna get that. Or on the West Coast, it just doesn't compute.
They'll be like, what's a barn dominium?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I'm from
And
Iowa.
an underwriter
originally.
would
Even Iowa guys are like, what the heck's a barn dominium? I'm like, oh my gosh. But so that's why it's critical to have like a local lender that has already created a good roster of appraisers.
So so you can stay up here because I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions.
Stand in that chair, all right.
So, yeah, so now whenever you get to the VA side of things, it doesn't matter if it's Guild Mortgage or if it's USAA, we're all using the portal and it's the same pool of appraisers. So whenever you're doing a VA transaction, from a lender side of things, you're looking at offers and you've got all of these pre-approval letters. Number one, you guys have been in this class. If you've been in this class, please know, don't take a letter at face value. Pick up the phone, call the lender, ask questions. If you don't know what questions to ask, send me an email and I'll send you a list. Because sometimes I know in my case, if someone is making an offer and they're using my letter, that's great. I would prefer to pick up the phone and call the seller's agent myself and explain what a pre-approval letter means to me, which is basically a pre-underwritten file. But that's not how all lenders just, that's not all lenders are like that. And there's a difference between a pre-qual letter and a pre-approval, right? And you guys know that. So you're looking, you've made your phone calls, you've done a net sheet. Then you've really got to think to yourself, who of these lenders, they're all within a couple $1,000. Who of these lenders is going to get me to the closing table? Because that's what matters. And part of that conversation is this an unusual property? Because if it's unusual property, you need to stick with, you really need to work with a local lender who has local appraisers for that unusual property. So when you're looking at all of those offers, you've got to keep in mind, is this going to be a difficult property to appraise? And if it is, you really need to stick with local. Because it could make or break the deal. Before, back in the olden days, if an appraisal came back and it didn't look good, it's okay. The seller would extend a contract. You guys would switch lenders and, try a different pass at it. Now, sellers do not have to extend contracts. So it's more critical now than ever that you guys make sure you do it right up front, because you could totally miss the deal because of a bad appraisal at the end of a transaction, and then you got a buyer that's homeless. Do what? Yeah, exactly. I mean, people aren't, they didn't write a contract just for fun unless it was an investment property.
So I'm new back into the market.
Mhm.
What has changed that the sellers don't have to extend if they don't want to?
They got backup contracts, so they got a, they'll st-
All they gotta do is put it back on the
Well-
market and it blows up
They can
again.
say, no, I'm not extending.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, yeah, sellers, the question was, if you were, why aren't sellers extending? Because I don't have to. They could stick it back on the market, possibly get more money because it's been 3 or 4 weeks. You know? So, I didn't, let me see if the slides were sent over to me because I want to be sure that we cover, the,
Send it to you, but then also whenever Chris talks, can he like get close like you are so that we can hear better?
yeah, I'll step away and let him step up. Do what?
Finally,
Finally.
the movie starts. But the previews get to the premiere show.
Hey, that was like legit stuff. It does all matter. All right.
So is the appraisal management company
on this.
scenario, is that federally mandated? I mean, they weren't always around.
They weren't.
And now everybody has to go through them. So what was the purpose of that?
2010. Thank God.
Yeah, Dodd-Frank, whenever, all of, after the meltdown, Dodd-Frank it was the, regulation that put appraisal management companies into play.
So that there was more separation.
Yep. Literally, and Brandy and BJ can attest to this. I don't know, Chris, if you were in the business back then, but literally I would just pick up the phone and call all of the appraisers to see what their workload was like and who could take the order. And I could pick appraisers based on the type of property and which ones that they were best at in terms of appraising, because, some of them are a little bit more
Yeah.
comfortable with other appraisals. And I would collect a check and they would literally come to my office and pick up payment. And I will tell you, and Chris, were you doing appraisals back then? I will tell you that there were some appraisers that weren't paid for their work because the lender didn't feel they did a great job because the value didn't get made. So that really was how business was done back then. So it really, we really needed the regulations. Not for people like us who were doing it right, but there were a lot of shadiness going on. And what ended up happening is lenders ended up with a bunch of collateral that just really wasn't worth what the appraisal said it was worth because of those problems at the time. So you guys do, Chris, I want you to come up here. Here's the struggle from an appraisal standpoint. You guys show up to go list a property. And you guys have got to determine what's the house. What will it sell for? And right now there's a difference in what it'll sell for and what it'll appraise for.
Yeah.
And it's the first time that we've had to have that conversation in I don't know how long. Ever. I don't ever remember having to have that conversation. We've gotten really good at putting together figures for your buyer that shows them, hey, Tansy said you guys had to pay $273 for this house, but the house was listed at $260. And Tansy said that it likely is going to appraise for about $262. So are you comfortable? Are you prepared to write a check for that $11,000 difference? Because now as a lender, I've got to go back and verify they have the funds, and those funds don't require that they also have reserves left over as well. So you guys have got to get really confident, and I'm hoping this class will give you the clarity that gives you the confidence on how to accurately price houses, or if you're on the buyer side, accurately, for lack of a better word, predict what the value might come in at, so we can make sure that the transaction is still going to be fine. So the better you are at doing CMAs, like the appraiser would do an appraisal, what you think is a comp and what an appraiser think is a comp could be two different things. So it's really important that you guys get really good at determining what is and is not a comp. But also know and understand that you guys get really good at that when you're pricing the house. When you're making an offer, you got to prepare your buyer that, hey, you're going to have to pay more for the house, but I don't think it's going to appraise for as much as you got to pay. So we need to talk to the lender and make sure that you know what you're going to do in the event that it doesn't appraise. What we're going to do as a lender, and I can't tell you what anybody else would do, but we use Mortgage Coach, which is a software that allows us to run different scenarios. So we could say, all right, I talked to Tansy. She said you guys had to pay $273 for the house. She thinks it's going to appraise for $262. So if that happens, this is what the numbers could look like, or this is what the numbers could look like, and make sure your buyer is prepared. I love the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. If you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it. But rule number 1 or habit number 1 is to be proactive. And to me, having those conversations is being proactive. So again, that conversation, that relationship with all parties that are in the transaction matter. So I want Chris to come up here and talk to you guys about what the process is like as an appraiser in choosing comps, so that you can think about how you choose comps, and then feel free to ask him questions in regards to that. Because if you guys learn nothing else but to have a better understanding of what an appraiser feels as a comp, then it's a good day. And then I guess the other thing that I want you guys to know and understand is no matter how much we like Chris, no matter how much we like Robert, no matter how much we like Brian, or we like Josh, at the end of the day,
Don't forget
Mikey.
and Mikey, at the end of the day, their work is going to be graded by a system that's algorithm based only. No make sense at all. It's all algorithms. So their appraisal is going to be graded. And if the appraisal comes back with a 5, well, if the appraisal comes back as a 5, we got a problem.
Yes.
For collateral underwrite. If it comes back as a 4, we got to read the narrative. And the underwriter has to then make a decision whether or not that appraisal is okay based on the narrative or the explanation as to why the numbers would be out of adjustment. And it's trying to understand the algorithms for that, for collateral underwrite, that is done on every appraisal at the last minute, which determines whether or not you're closing on time, because you may or may not need a new appraisal based on this collateral underwrite with algorithms none of us really understand. It's like trying to figure out credit scores. It's like trying to figure out how to get your Facebook post seen by more people. It's like a mystery, but we all have to live with it and do the best we can to figure out how to understand the system. So just know that picking comps is only the beginning of that whole process for the appraisers. And there is not an appraiser or a lender that's exempt from collateral underwrite. Every file, everywhere, has to go through collateral underwrite. Once you go through collateral underwrite, or to get to that point, again, is based on relationships, explanation, and it also is going to come down to an underwriter making a decision, who also has to be very well trained on the appraisal side of things, which again is why lender matters. But Chris, explain the whole comp process.
Yep.
And you get enough of the realtors that go, why did you use that comp? Here's a better comp. why did you forget, So the conversation enough to speak to that part of the realtor
Excellent.
CMA comp versus you.
Excellent. Okay, so I've been doing this almost a decade. Us as an appraisal firm, we've been doing this maybe a year and a half where we've actually grown. The market that we're in right now is something that I have never seen. So
Basically,
yeah, so how do you choose a comparable sale? Because as an appraiser, it is a fine line we're walking through. You have all these parties of this transaction that you have to that you're going to have to satisfy one way or the other. So you have, and then at the last end, it's kind of that final wrench in it. Collateral underwriting. It's this big. Every single one of our appraisals that we push out has to go through this, and we might have a rock solid appraisal. And if this number comes back higher than what the lender is comfortable with, it can kill a deal like that. So, so the first process and what I coach my entire team to do right now, it's all about time and condition. Time and condition. So when we go into we're appraising a home up here in Sherman. What am I looking for? I'm looking for, and this would be good too for a realtor as far as, creating that CMA. Looking for similarly conditioned homes. Typically, I'll say GLA plus or minus 25%. So if I'm doing a house up here, say it's built in 1970, ranch, 1900 square foot. I'm looking at something plus or minus 25%. Before I even do that, though, a phrase I always tell my guys and gals at the office is, it's a fool who has no doubts. So before I do anything, I want to see what is all out there. So even though I might narrow in that range, I just want to see what is in here, what is something that could have sold, because I don't want to miss something that sold next door. Because even if it's not comparable and I don't put it in the report, some of these algorithm models will actually pull it and say, well, why didn't you use this comp? Because the house burnt down as a brand new construction. And they're like, oh, okay. But that's one more wrench to throw into the system. And that's why it's critical. You just kind of know what you're getting into. So I'm looking for condition. I'm looking for gross living area. And then the second thing that I'm looking for is, especially in this market, what has recently sold. In the history of us doing this, we have never made as many time adjustments as we are doing now. Because it might be, hey, that house next door, that sucker is the money comp, but it sold a year ago. It sold 11 months ago. So then I am trying to make massive time adjustments on it, even if I can, to get it where it goes. So condition, time. I'll go out actually a little bit further. If it is within that neighborhood and it's a similar condition house that just recently sold. The other thing I'm looking for, as far as when you guys are creating a CMA for your client, I would be looking for condition, how soon did it sell, and I would be looking at solds. Because the other challenging thing right now, and I know you realtors are getting this, is like, well, so-and-so's got this, they're listing. I had a conversation yesterday with a realtor. It was a Frisco property. And night and day, this thing would sell for $850. I mean, you have comps that support it. However, you've got several realtors in the area that have just, I call it fishing. They're fishing for somebody who just comes in with a cash offer and wants to offer a wild amount. So you have these weird active sales right now that are no rhyme or reason. And what has happened is we kind of call it, back in the day, this is before I started, but that kind of like bid jockey. Hey, who could appraise this for the highest? Like, that's not the right thing to do, but I think you guys are experiencing that a little bit too. Well, so-and-so said they could get X amount for this property. Well, they said I could get more for it. And a house is worth what someone is willing to pay. However, from a lender's standpoint, it doesn't matter. Let it sell. Let it sell. What did it actually sell for? So you have to be going off of sold sales. And that is a tough thing for you guys. I mean, that's why someone hires a realtor. So you can walk them through that process and just let them know, hey, you can ask whatever you want for it. It's not going to appraise. An appraiser is going to go off of what has sold. The other thing that we're looking for too is if you have a similarly conditioned house, it meets that criteria as far as gross living area, and it sold in the last 3 months. The other thing I'm looking for, and I would encourage you guys to look for, is what was it listed for and what did it sell for? So maybe it was listed for 250 and it came in at 265. Well, 250 might have been that benchmark for that. And this is the other kind of challenging thing right now. That thing might have appraised only at 250, but the second that property sold at 265, now that's the new, we would call it the money comp. Now that just set the new bar for that neighborhood of what it is. I need 2 of those sales to really kind of change that value as far as what that property should be valued at.
It just can't be a one-off.
It can't be a one-off. I need 2 unadjusted sales prices that support whatever we would appraise the property for. So I would just caution and encourage, look for similar condition, look for what has sold, and look for what has recently sold.
Will you explain the difference between condition and quality?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So you might have, quality would be like the quality material utilized at time of original construction. So I might have a Q3 house, and it ranges from Q1, which would be like, I tell the guys, like Tony Montana house, you know, where it's just like crazy gold and, you know, like just over the top. Not a whole lot of those. You have Q2s. Primarily the properties we deal with are Q3, Q4. Now we do, like if we get down to Highland Park and stuff, I mean, there are some excessive houses, but primarily it's Q3, Q4, and that's the quality material utilized at time of original sale. Condition is completely different. Every home, when it's built, if it is and has not been previously occupied, is a C1. So you might have a manufactured home that's a Q4, Q5, and it can be a C1 at time of original sale. You might have a $500,000 house that's a Q3 and is a C3. So the manufactured home is going to be a C1, and it has to do with the condition. As far as like a C1 would always be previously unoccupied. A C2 would be heavily, heavily renovated, like down to the studs, not just a lipstick job, you know, with paint, flooring, but like down to the studs. Most properties would be C3. Say it's had a new kitchen, maybe some countertops and some flooring. That's a C3.
Can I interject here?
Yes.
If you guys have a listing and you know that they have gone through that house, like he said, to the studs, the appraiser needs to know
Yes.
how much renovation's been done, because it matters.
It helps. It's extremely helpful.
So it's not like you're trying to persuade them. You're providing information that is really important to the appraisal. So leaving that information behind, I remember I bought a house that the city was about to condemn, and of course everybody said there was no way I could bring it back, which is a challenge. Don't challenge me. So we totally redid this house down to the shiplap walls. When I had it appraised, the realtor had me, realtor, you say it right, I don't, had me put a list of everything that we bought and replaced, including the doorknobs. And I'm, you know, back then I didn't understand, and it was a real pain in the butt to do that list, but it did matter.
It does matter.
And so if you've got a house that you know they've done a ton of work to, help the appraisers out and provide the information.
Yeah. Question.
So if we have a home, we're still experiencing a lot of flipping and, you know, investment opportunities for folks both in and out of the area. But let's say somebody buys a 70s or 80s home, they go in and they renovate pretty much everything, all of the appliances, countertops, finishes, light fixtures, floor coverings, all
I'll repeat in a minute.
current things, okay, what somebody would find in a new home. As practitioners, helping them evaluate what we think it might sell for.
Mhm.
What is your thoughts about comparing that to a 2018, a 2020, a 2021 home that is new, if you will, or much newer,
Mhm.
but the condition of these properties, you know, they painted the brick, they put new shutters.
Mhm.
I'm talking about major
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
overhaul.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is that something that y'all would do as a comp? Is it something that we should stay away from? Where do you kind of draw the line? Because their objective, of course, is to make it as new as possible.
Mhm.
It's in an older part of town.
Mhm.
They want to maximize their return on investment. They bought it. They've spent a bunch of money fixing it up.
Mhm.
Now they want to cash in. Is it as good as the home? You know, the effective age, I guess, is
Yep,
where we're
yep.
going with this.
Yeah, are those new homes?
So the question is, say we have something that was built 60s, 70s, 80s, has been completely remodeled up to where like the condition would be similar to like a new or slightly used in, like a C2 new construction home, like dang near brand new. Would an appraiser use a new construction home to be a comparable sale? The answer would be no. So what I would advise my team to do is anybody can, other states have certain zoning laws and what you can build and cannot build. Texas, for example, is relatively lenient on what you can do. So you might have a manufactured home, you might have a community of manufactured homes, and someone decides to take that manny off of it and do $1 million house. It doesn't mean that house is worth $1 million. However, in this situation, what I would look for is quality and condition. And right now, especially even up here, Sherman is like booming. There, you can find similar quality homes. When I say quality, is material utilized at time of original construction. And I'm going to find something that is completely tricked out. In that case, I would even go back. I would go back a little bit further in time and make massive time adjustments, just because I'm trying to find, say the house was built in 1970 and it's a ranch and they put $100,000 into this thing, which you can easily do. I'm going to find other comps like that. And I can find those right now. They're Plano, just south of us. I mean, they're experiencing the same thing where people like, there are homes that are being completely remodeled that are on par with new construction homes. However, your primary comparable sale will not be a new construction home. Now, an appraiser could use a new construction home to possibly bracket like a condition or something specific, but that would be a secondary comparable sale.
Be on the second page, probably.
Yeah,
4,
yeah,
5,
yeah.
6.
It would not be my primary comparable sale.
And it seems like there are so many of those, whether you call it a renovated home or a flipped home or something.
Yeah,
There's enough similars.
yeah. So
to draw out.
the feedback, and again, it depends the neighborhood, but if the neighborhood is in what we would call that rejuvenation stage, you should be able to find other comparable sales. And if not, I might jump to a different neighborhood before I just cherry pick
We
a
have
new.
to do that all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Not neighborhoods, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even to Michelle's point, like the example she gave, the more information you can get the appraiser, like that is like gold for me. I mean, it really is. And I will put all of that in the report, not because I'm basically because I'm just covering my butt. To be honest with you, it creates a more credible product. That way, if for some reason the loan gets routed through one of these big box guys, I have something to stand on. So I never want to produce or sign my name on a report that I can't back up. And I'll argue all day long that, in that specific example, why did you use these comps? Maybe they're a half mile, hell, maybe they're a mile away.
Some in our
I'll say
market could be 2
exactly-
miles away.
Yep, maybe they're 2 miles
We don't
away.
have a lot of conforming
Yep.
neighborhoods in Sherman and Denison pre-owned. I mean, obviously, the
Yep.
new push, they're everywhere, but
Yep.
yeah, some
What-
of these.
But Norman, to your point, whenever you guys got to go a couple miles out to
Yeah.
find comps, that's where when we get the collateral review back at the last minute, remember, we have loans approved, ready to close, waiting on the appraisal. We get the appraisal and it's got to go through collateral underwrite. We're 3 or 4 days from closing at this point. And in that case, then the collateral review is going to pick up all of these sales in that neighborhood And it's not going to understand why you went 2 miles out instead of using the house next door. That's why the appraiser's narrative is so important, and the information you guys provided to help them with their narrative.
I would say in regards to that collateral underwriter, it's kind of like that last wrench that can get thrown in the gears. Because, hey, you listed it properly, you found an active and willing party to buy the property, the appraisal came in, it made value, everything looks good, CU score is off the charts. I can't speak for every appraisal firm. Our appraisal firm is intimately familiar with the collateral underwriter as much as we can to be compliant. We've had conversations with the two individuals that created that with parties. So like, it is like this taboo thing, but there are things that we know that can keep us kosher with that. So we can still provide a credible report. But again, that just falls back on like the lender you're using and what kind of roster they have.
And the underwriter's full understanding of the appraisal, because the underwriter in that case has to be okay with the high score for CU, knowing that we've got comps that they had to go 2 miles out instead of using neighborhood comps, but they're comfortable signing off on that loan because of so it's still underwriter's discretion at that point. So you've done your job. Buyer's agent's done their job. As a lender, we've prepared the customer for the fact they might have to write a check for the difference. We ran through all those scenarios. Now, last minute, underwriter's discretion at that point.
Yep, agreed.
So in a generalization, we all know they're dangerous, but it's a broad brush. How far out would you suggest age-wise on similar properties would be comfortable to use for market analysis or even in your, appraisal report?
So I'm going to go off.
I really like the 25%. I mean, I've always used that.
Yeah, it's
It
just
makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Some on the low, some on the high. Where does it all balance out? That's perfect. But age in a perfect world, we're all same age, and then we go out maybe 2 or 3 or 5 years. Once we get 10 years out and we're struggling to find anything that seems to be reasonable to use, where do you think we just got to kind of
Repeat
cut
his
the
question.
line?
So the question had to do with age and how far, plus or minus, if it's and how far out would you go as far as like the high and low age? If it's a neighborhood and the neighborhood is primarily, built in, 1975, 76, and that's why I go back, I might go plus or minus 3 to 5 years. I'm going to see what was in that neighborhood. And that's where really, when you're creating that CMA, know what's around you. So before you put any of those parameters on, just see what's out there. Then start whittling it down based on gross living area. Age doesn't throw me off as much because if I've got good comps, they're going to be about the same age. They just, if you do all the other things, they will fall into that. I've seen other appraisers make age adjustments personally. I think that's a hard thing to defend.
Yes.
To say, hey, this is 5 years old and a 5-year-old house brings a $5,000 premium over a 7-year-old house. Like, I just think it's hard to defend. So as far as age goes, plus or minus 3 to 5 years. If it's a new construction home, I'm going to try to find other new construction homes, but I probably wouldn't go maybe more than 2 or 3 years old to make a slight condition adjustment. And if I go past that, it's because I'm trying to bracket something. And in appraiser lingo bracketing, we have to bracket everything. So if my square footage of my house is 2,000 square foot, I have to bracket on the high end and the low end. So those would be secondary sales. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else have any questions? Hey, you guys on the call, let me unshare screen so I could see who's got any additional questions. Do you guys have any questions in regards to what is a comp and what is not a comp? Okay. Yeah, Kristen, ask away. Kristen, did you raise your hand? No? Okay.
Sorry, no, I scratched my shoulder.
Gave yourself a little massage.
Pat yourself on the back.
Pat yourself on the back. Yeah. You need to do some of that too, little mama. You're doing great.
Michelle,
Yeah.
Michelle, so on these unique properties that we have out here, and we have a lot of them, what is the best way to find comps on something that's so unique?
Are you thinking like, what do you, be specific, unique in, material?
Yeah, like, there might be something out in the country that's a Victorian style home and there's nothing else around there. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing for miles, for 50 miles.
Yeah, you
Well,
must
about-
be looking in bug tussle.
We've appraised in bug tussle. So the question being like, say like a Victorian home that's out in the country, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so again, I'm going to find similar quality and condition homes. I will, if it is some of these one-off towns, then for our team and what I coach our team to do is I will exhaust all resources within that immediate town, but I will start jumping to other towns and finding something that, so if it's a Victorian home, 1880, 2-story, then I'm going to be looking for what kind of condition is it in. I'm going to find similar quality homes, but I'm going to start looking as, hey, how remodeled is this? How tricked out is this? And then I will start jumping to other towns, and the towns have to be similar in like marketability, because you can argue based on comparable sales. There are certain towns that will bring a higher premium than other towns.
For instance, this is not a good example because of the mileage difference, but what comes to mind is a property in Pottsboro is not comparable to a property in Savoy, even if they were both on 5 acres.
Yep.
Because the marketability, I mean, it's the market demand is totally different for those two towns. So you might find a perfect comp, but in, a poor location. And that, I use that as as an example too, because you are going from Grayson County to Fannin County.
So that's the other
So
difference.
if you are looking at a property that's really close to that county line, your comps, an underwriter is going to want to see comps in the same county. If they cross county lines, again, there's got to be a good explanation.
Yeah.
And it's got to be
Because
one of
that's
those
all we
county border towns. I mean, yeah. So,
Sometimes I find it helpful on some of those properties or a lot of rural things. Sometimes your best search is by school district,
yes.
because they will expand outside of some municipalities. And they might say they're in a different, town, but the school district drives that demand and that
Exactly.
marketability. And sometimes that broader brush will help you bring in comps that are more meaningful than just staying with a town. Go out with the district, because those boundaries are always broader. than
And that's something that we would want to tell you, this is why I picked these comps,
Love
because
it.
the school district is so strong in this area.
Yeah.
Tansy, that's a really good point. You guys leaving information behind for the appraiser to look at, to see where in the hell did you come up with this number?
Thank you. Yes.
Please give them that information. The worst thing you could do is possibly piss an appraiser off because they feel like you're doing their job. But let me tell you, I don't have an appraiser we work with that has that attitude, because that's not the right attitude, because we are all in it together.
I have had that
I
happen
would-
and it crushed.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would even say too, like having the information. Again, I can't speak for all appraisals, or like appraisers, but like I can speak for our team and like what we're trying to groom that next generation of appraisers. It is really like, hey, help me understand how you got to this number.
Mhm.
And is there something I'm missing? I'll even give like the lender through the appropriate protocol. If I'm gonna miss, I mean, me being a people pleaser, like it drives me nuts. However, I will exhaust all resources. So like, hey, this is where I'm at. am I missing something? And that's why I always tell my team that a fool has no doubts. Like, you just have to ask. We've had times, I remember specifically,
Mhm.
there was a deal for a guild, and I remember I just needed one other comp and I could not figure it out. And there was a comp that sold off market, but they were able to provide the sales disclosure for it. And it was the money comp. It was like literally next door. And I knew it had sold. However, Texas is a non-disclosure state. So again, it's like that open communication. I'm never going to sign off on anything that'll put my family, my license, my firm at risk. However, there are things that get slipped through the cracks. I've had times where I get off a phone with a realtor and I'm like, man, I hope I'm wrong. Thank goodness you're calling me, because I thought the same thing. What am I missing? And sometimes it was just priced improperly, but I can sleep better at night knowing I went through all those steps.
There's a couple of things. We're getting real close to our top of the hour. I schedule these for an hour and a half, so there's plenty of time for Q&A. But I just want you guys to know and understand and be familiar with that choosing the comps, because it matters. Yeah, good. And then understanding that the underwriter still has to underwrite the appraisal. So just because we say, hey, it looks like it made value, there aren't any lender required repairs, the underwriter still gets to make a decision. I can tell you, fortunately only on one hand, how many times an appraiser turned in a report that says as is. But they also took pictures of cracks in the brick, or they also took pictures of the siding missing from around the perimeter of the property. And so even though they did it as is, it's really not okay based on the loan program guidelines. And so we as the lender have had to go and get some repairs made. So we're really careful at saying, hey, it looks like we're going to be okay. The value's made and there's not any repairs, but the underwriter hasn't underwritten the appraisal yet.
Yep.
So, and that is not a guild thing. That's a lender thing. So don't feel like anybody's being picked on. The other thing I want to make sure that you guys understand, in case any of you guys have got to fall off, and then we'll be here for another 30 minutes for anybody that wants to hang on, is if you feel like the appraisal is incorrect, you feel like the appraiser missed a comp, and you've got additional information, there is a protocol to say, hey, I disagree, and this is why I disagree, and this is what I would have used if, or this is what I think might be a good comp, and this is why I think it's a good comp. Don't make it emotional. These guys are working on, it's statistics, it's numbers, and there's not emotions in numbers, but there is explanation in numbers. So keep the emotions out, explain why you feel that what was used was not the best comp available, provide additional information on what you would have thought would be a better comp and why, and give them the statistics to back up your opinion, and do it respectfully. I know at that point in the transaction, you're towards the end, you got buyer and seller expectations. It is a highly emotional time, but we have to remove the emotions from it. Other than showing empathy, that is the only emotion we need to have at that time, empathy for everybody involved. But at the end of the day, you, me, the appraiser, we got to do it right.
Yeah.
We have to do it right because there's too much on the line. And as much as I want to please the buyer and I want to please you guys, and I want the seller to think good things about the lender the buyer chose, we still have to do it right. So there is a protocol. Don't be scared to use it. But just know it's based on facts, figures, and explanation, not emotions.
Through you, the lender,
Mhm.
that's the first step.
We'll give you the form to fill out. You'll fill out the form and get it back. We give it to the appraisal management company, and the appraisal management company gets it to the appraiser. That's the protocol.
Occasionally we will get, where the realtor will contact us directly or something post, and I'll say, hey, thank you so much. It is, we will consider everything. It just to protect our butts, it has to be routed through that correct protocol. So I encourage them like, hey, this is great info. It's being routed to the wrong person. So send it to the lender. And sometimes I'll even give the lender a heads up and be like,
That's what I
hey,
was gonna
I
say.
think this is coming over. So we'd love, or I even ask the lender, hey, even after the deal, sometimes I'm like, I'll get their permission because our client is the lender. Say, hey, is it okay if I go through that appraisal with them and walk them through why we did what we did? We don't do that all the time, but like, just know that's just how we roll at our office.
Good, because I forgot what I was gonna say. Go ahead.
If you reboot your computer, I'll
Okay.
ask the next
Yeah.
question. So in current market, and I know you can only respond to your firm and how you
Mhm.
guys, but you're talking about leaving information at the house and providing additional details that helps you make your job somewhat easier. But in current market, are you finding personally in your firm that you're spending more time desktop to make sure that we even have a chance at getting something to meet value? Or because of the time constraints, you gotta pull the comps, you gotta jump, it's all broad brush, then you go back and you start digging and you start fine tuning, and then you're like, oh man, I can't find this, I don't see this, now I gotta depend on them telling me that they put in, gold plated fixtures and this, that, and the
Yeah.
other. What are you seeing happening in the real world from your firm? Because sometimes if we're not doing a very good job in the MLS
Yes.
with our input narrative, I
Yep.
realize it's a limited field. You also have additional room for private remarks. You guys see that.
Mhm.
The public does not. That's the time to go ahead and put all the tick marks and the check marks about all the great things we've done
Mhm,
to help you.
mhm.
But I don't know, I'm struggling with having to leave you a little portfolio on the table for you to flip through. You're in a hurry. Like she said, you gotta measure, you gotta take pictures, you gotta drive to the other comps. Do you really have time to read that we've put in, this brand, a Wolf stove and it? I mean, that should be in the MLS to the general public so that they know we put some quality into this, not just throwing new appliances at it. There's a difference between the brands, what have you. So, where can we help with that so that
I'm all like, before, for those of you guys on the call, and in the room, what Norman said is so important that you guys all need to hear. Your descriptions in the MLS need to be accurate,
Yes.
because the appraiser can't determine whether or not that comp is a good comp based on pictures alone.
It's like junking.
Sometimes
Your
that's all we got.
description
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah.
And so I know when you're listing a property, you're thinking from a marketability standpoint, I need to describe the property this way. I don't know, and I'm not a broker, and I see brokers on the call, so you guys ask whether or not it is inappropriate once the house is under contract to edit the notes and make them realistic, real, not your marketing fluff words, so that the appraiser really does have accurate information in the description when that property is being used for a comp later.
So I would say, as far as the description goes, I get it. It's marketing, it's a spa-like experience. You have all these things. But
I'm still waiting on that, but keep talking.
You can get your license and sell.
no, no. You guys have a much tougher job than I do. I will say the information that you have, like the very descriptive stuff, that is like gold for us. It really is. And even though if it's not in the descriptive part, where everybody, when they're just flying through, you guys have an attachments tab. If there is a survey, if there is a building sketch where another appraiser, one thing that drives us nuts is that when it says GLA/appraiser, okay, well, I'm going to still measure it, but I want to see what Timmy got down the road on it, because we might be looking at something different. Just attach it. The very detailed, updated list, just put that in the attachments. That's like gold for us. So I'm not asking you to do something different. But if you have then the attachments on the listing, that's great. And our office, we spend time on it. We look at the details. The more information we have, I feel like we can put together a better product, a premium product than the guy next door. And that's because we just have, it's how do you get that information?
So to answer the Norman's question, either fill it out in the MLS with all the description of the doorknobs you replaced and the gold
Just put it
plated
as an
whatever,
attachment. That's great.
or put it as an attachment, or leave
Yeah,
it
put it as
behind
an
at the
attachment.
house.
With the seller's disclosure, like basically
Yes.
all those other things we upload, put it there, you'll
Yeah.
find it.
I'm not as concerned with some of those other disclosures. What we really look
No, I'm
for.
just saying that's where it would go.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Right in
The
that spec,
transaction
under the
text.
attachment. So survey, sketch, updates. I love it. All those things.
Appraisers broadly will look at that.
They
I have
should.
not
guess
talked
that's
to
why
one.
I always leave something in the house.
They
just in
should.
case.
Yeah, man, you guys leave
I-
a sketch there. You have the updates.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm taking that with me. I'm taking pictures. As long as it's not the original, I'm like, hey, where are the building plans? I ask for everything. I mean, I just do. Because there's nothing more frustrating when you're typing the report and you're like, man, I really wish I knew this. Or if I've got two data points that are contradicting themselves. Who's right? It's all about the information. There was one question on here as far as acreage, and I do want to answer that.
Oh, good.
It was, what would we do on like acreage properties plus or minus? First off, if it's on an acre, if somebody's buying a home on an acre, they're probably not looking for a house on a half acre, period. They're looking for an acre plus property. So I'm going to look for acre plus properties. If it's on 3 acres, I'll probably do like maybe 1 to 5 acres. If it's 5 acres, I'll maybe do plus or minus 2 to 3 acres. If it's 20 acres, I might do 13 to 27, something like that. So as it gets bigger, I'm going to have a little bit bigger range. But if you're looking at a 3-acre property, you're maybe plus or minus.
There's one thing I also wanted to make sure that you guys understand, because it's just quirky based on loan program. So, and this is the only loan program you got to be careful for. So on acreage, if you are looking at accepting an offer and the buyer is using USDA financing, USDA does not allow the appraiser, or part of the guidelines is no value is given to any ancillary improvements to the property. So that could include a swimming pool. It could include that big shop in the back.
It's insulated with water.
Insulated and water and electric and a guest house. None of that can be given value. The value is only on the house and the acreage. So if you're going to be looking at a USDA transaction, you need to make sure that the value is in the house and the land, not the house, land, and all the ancillaries.
Like equestrian farm, we
Yeah.
have like.
And USDA is the only one like that. So USDA red flags, if you can't, right. If you guys forget this conversation, but go, oh my gosh, I know Michelle said something about USDA. Send us a text. Us guild folks will tell you what to do.
That was worth the price of admission right there.
There you go. Thanks, Tansy.
If you get a USDA
Glad I said it before you left.
You send it back.
Then only if it's separate. from-
And then from a mobile home standpoint, because we're starting to see those, there's 2 things I wanted to bring up. Number one, if you are looking at listing or selling a mobile home, get with us first with the property address, because we got to look it up on the TDHCA website. We got to look at installation records, and that will make or break a transaction. So if you guys are about to list a property, you better know how it can be financed, because you're going to limit your buyer if it's a used home sitting on site. VA is the only way to go besides cash and banks, and the banks aren't really doing those. So be really careful about that. Cross mods. If you have not looked up, Clayton Homes is building cross mods, and you guys, this looks like a stick built house. And the comps you use on a cross mod are stick built comps. So we will see more and more of the cross mods. Guild has a special relationship between Fannie Mae and Clayton Homes. So I'm in the process right now of figuring out what that really means to us. It may mean that I develop a piece of a chunk of land, and we have a neighborhood of cross mods that I just but we just sell as specs because it's affordable housing and we got to be looking at some alternatives for affordable housing. So cross mods are different than a double wide or a triple wide. It looks like a house. Look it up on Clayton Homes website. You guys will be so impressed. But we'll see more and more of those. Now, if you have a like a Tilson or with those kit built houses that are built, a modular home built on site, that is comped to site built homes, not mobile homes. So as we have more and more people looking for affordable housing, you guys need to be fully aware how all of these different properties need to be priced and how they'll be appraised and how they'll be underwritten. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask questions. To any of us guild folks, we try to stay very educated on top of the industry for all things in terms of making sure those transactions close and fund on time with great communication. I get a lot of questions too on acreage limitations. It's because we're seeing, you know, people buy a double wide. I had someone call me the other day that had a double wide on 30 acres and their concern was the value was, there was more value in the acreage than on the home. Is that okay? If you have comps to support it, yes. If you don't, no. So it always comes down to the comps on the appraisals. So you guys have got to get really good at making sure you know and understand what is a comp, what is not a comp, how do I adjust comps. I'll do this class every couple of months because it is such a big part of y'all's business. Pricing the home right up front, preparing a buyer for what the value might be, letting the lender know what you think the value is going to be so we can make sure that the numbers are okay so we don't have surprises is how we get to the closing table without pissing anybody off. All right. So condition of houses, I have a checklist for that. So we'll be sure to send that out. So you have a checklist. You can either take a picture, save it on your phone in photos, which is my favorite way of keeping up with stuff, or hi Donnie, or save it on your desktop. It's great if you're going to go list a house and you know that there's some things that need to be done. So you can give them that list and now it's no longer your opinion. It is now guidelines if they want to sell their home. So feel free to use any of the tools and resources that we have available for that. We'll stay around for anybody that has any additional questions. I thank you so much for showing up. Several of you guys in this room have been here every single time for the last 6 classes. We'll wrap up next week talking about closing disclosures and make sure you guys know how to hand calculate those. Not really, but you do need to know where the numbers come from. And then we'll talk about customers for life as the last class. So we got 2 more left. So I'm going to have Chris come back up here because he's got the good information. I don't.
So what about houses like as is homes? Sellers not fixing things, you know, it's not foundation, like how, but everything it's a great neighborhood and everything the neighborhood's already been remodeled. Like how?
So Jen had a really good question. What happens if you guys walk into a home, seller knows the market's hot, the house is a mess, or maybe they inherited the house, whatever the situation is, the seller's like, you know what, I can make plenty of money in the house in its current condition and not have to deal with contractors or doing the manual labor. It's the holidays, so you're going to probably see more and more of this because people are busy. So if you guys come up to a property, you see cracks in the brick, they're wide. You see maybe some cracks in the foundation, you know it's going to be a problem. Seller's not willing to fix or doesn't have the money to fix it, which is a lot of times the case. So, or the roof's in bad shape, whatever it is. If you're working with a buyer, be sure you let the lender know what's going on so that we could advise you to how to get money for that house, because it's not going to be a mortgage loan at that point unless the seller's willing to fix the house. If you're listing the house, then your conversation is just basically you're limiting the number of buyers that could buy the house based on financing. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you guys can sell. People got to pay for it. So my advice in a similar situation, so Jen, if you walked up to a house as a buyer's agent and you see that the house is in this condition, you've talked to the seller's agent and the seller says that they're not fixing anything, what do? The buyer loves the house. It's right across the street from the school. They want the house. In that case, there have been so many different workarounds that we've done. In one situation, we have convinced the seller that, hey, we'll pay for the structural engineer's report. We'll find out what it's going to cost. What if it works with the numbers and we're going to just take the cost of the structural work off of the bottom line at the closing table, and they don't have to cut a check because it's coming out of the proceeds. That again is where who you're working with and the connections and the relationships those people have matters. Because all of us that have been in this area for a long time have several people we could pick up the phone from a foundation repair standpoint and go, hey, we'll get the loan fully approved. We'll have buyer and seller sign the closing documents. Then we need you to go out there and fix the house, and we'll cut you a check out of the proceeds. You'll just have a 5-day waiting period from the time you start work till the time you finish. And because of a relationship, they trust us and they'll do the work.
The seller's still paying.
So the seller's still paying, but the seller's not writing a check, because a lot of times that's the objective or objection. They don't have the ability to write the check. So asking enough questions to find out really what's going on helps us try to find solutions. So, I mean, we are seeing more and more of that where the seller just doesn't want to fix anything. And if there's a long list of stuff, we may not be able to use that scenario because we're talking about several contractors, unless we could get a contractor in and out of there in a short period of time that will wait to be paid to close. But at that time, I'm not putting my name on the line. I'm not putting my reputation on the line until that loan's fully approved. I have a survey. I know the survey's fine. I have an appraisal that's subject to, I have an approval. All conditions are met. We are only waiting on that repair work to be done before I'll pull the trigger. Because it's not, it's my reputation on the line.
So after the fact, when that happens, appraiser, who comes back out and re-inspects to release the funds?
If it's a foundation, the structural engineer has to sign it. The structural engineer who looked at the work and did the report will come out and certify that the repairs have been made.
We're not.
They're not
inspectors.
inspectors.
We're high level. We use,
But it
condition.
could be a lender required repair.
Yes, it could be.
So isn't that in your realm? of-
No, they'll kick it back to us and go, hey, listen, I'm not an expert in that field. I can't tell you if it
We
was
have
done right.
disclosures and all that stuff. If it's like, hey, subject to carpet being installed,
Yeah.
I can figure that out. That's
Usually you say, send me a picture and we'll sign it.
Yeah. Only if you're trusted. Again, it's the relationship that matters.
But
sometimes.
if you're on the
Well, if you're
seller
an
side,
hour and a
we're
half
trying to
away,
figure out
that's true.
law-wise, like,
Trust the agent.
If you're on the seller side trying to feel calm,
Yeah, if I got
so Jen's follow-up question is, if you're on the seller side and you're listing the property, you know it's got foundation work, the seller won't fix it. They don't want to take a chance that they could fix it as part of the net proceeds. They just say, just sell it as is. Then you need to do your CMA based on as is. So.
I just wanted to make a comment about those really hard listings
Mhm.
where it's really hard, like that whole Victoria layout wherever. From experience, if it's really, really challenging, and you wouldn't do this all the time, but you could talk to your seller about having the house appraised for $500 or $600.
That's another option
And
too.
know exactly where you stand, because I had a buyer one time and the listing agent couldn't figure it out. Well, the buyer had 24,000 in equity when they bought the house because they didn't do the appraisal or whatever.
Mhm.
What a price for
Mhm.
more than what. they-
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if it's really,
Well,
really
hell,
hard,
you guys don't
you're
get
probably
it.
gonna save yourself.
There is some, yeah.
$300 or
It's an
whatever,
Mhm.
It's an opinion of
$1,000
value,
you wouldn't have
opinion.
straight.
Right.
Either side.
Yeah, so the question is, if you do have one of those really difficult properties and you're not quite sure how, you know, where to set the price, then you can pay an appraiser to go out and do an appraisal, a listing appraisal. Here's the challenge, that in reality, these guys are so busy, good luck finding one that will go out and do that.
That is tough.
Because they are so busy. Remember, the lenders are clients. So I was talking to another appraiser the other day, and he said he had to stop answering his phone except from clients because he got so many of those phone calls.
Yeah.
Because you guys are struggling to put a price on properties. And he said, at the end of the day, I have a few clients that I have worked with for 15, 20 years. Those are my clients. They keep me so busy that I have to turn orders away. I can't answer my phone for the Joe Blows that call and need help. So, which is why you guys can't find, I can't tell you how many times, Chris, I'll get a phone call that goes, hey, I have a buyer. They chose their own lender. We're supposed to close this week and they still don't have an appraiser that will take the order.
Yeah.
That's reality. Right now, the appraisers that are familiar with the properties and are working in a concentrated area and they have a client they've worked with for a long time, they're super busy. They're not taking orders from the other lenders that are trying to get them to take orders.
I would say,
He
yeah.
could tell you how
So,
many
like,
orders he
if we're
turns
doing
away.
100, like 120, 130 a week, our firm, and Joshua, like how many comes across in a week? How many do we decline?
So we decline about 50% of the bid offers that we get.
So
and we were-
50% of
Yeah.
the bid offers that we get, we're declining. We can only accept 130 right now as our capacity. So
And you know what's funny to me is everybody's answer to that problem is to pay the appraisers more. They don't need more money, they need more time,
Yeah,
or they
so-
need more people.
just a plug here, just like a realtor is a critical component of like helping someone buy, sell a home, transition. Being an appraiser is still an honorable profession. Like I love it. And that's like what we're super passionate about is like to think, man, I'm so busy. Well, it's not because you're doing such a great job. It's because there is definitely a need for more appraisers. So that's like our focus is like on licensed and trainees. And that's like educating lenders a lot of times that, hey, if a lender, the underwriter accept a licensed trainee, which the state of Texas does, it doesn't mean it's any lesser of an appraisal. It's just trying to get, supervised. It's still my name on it. I still put my eyes on it, but creating that next generation of appraisers is critical for us so we don't get into this bottleneck. It's kind of embarrassing, to be honest with you, because you've got really bad appraisers boasting about, man, I've got so much business. It's not because you're really good. It's just because there's such a shortage. Yeah, and it will change too.
Well, explain, you guys would be shocked at what they have to go through to get
It
a
is.
license. Explain it.
It is a and we are still learning it. Like we joke at our firm that we're going to outpace the appraisal death rate because we're getting, we know them, like when we call TALCB, they know us on first name. It's just because it is so difficult to get a license. I have people calling me to, hey, can you mentor? I have 5 spots at any given time. They're always full, always full. They're like gold. We have the next 4 or 5 appraisers already hired. Like I can't get them through the chute fast enough. So finding a mentor is extremely
How
hard.
many hours, I think she was asking, do you need training?
What is training hours? Joshua knows that.
I think it's 1,000 hours.
Yeah, it's
If you
1,000
rec-
hours.
1,000
They have
hours
to
of
have
training.
1,000 hours of training.
Yeah, and it's 6 months to be licensed, 12 months to be certified. And there are other requirements as well,
You have
but
to do CE like everybody else.
yeah,
And each lender has their own preferences of licensure
Yeah,
that they
it's-
will work with,
yeah.
requirements. So some will only work with licensed, some will only work with certified.
yeah,
some
so that
will not
lenders,
allow trainees and then give your USDA, FHA requirements as well. So
it's just very complex.
VAs and that's tight little
Yeah, so-
organization.
Those guys don't come off that panel. But those are all really good questions, but that is part of the issue that we have. There's just not enough people. So we could pay an appraiser $1,000. It doesn't, or
Doesn't
offer, it doesn't matter. That is not what they're using to
that's not
determine
being
whether or
very-
not they're
So you're
taking an
trying to
order.
wrap
It's
time
not the
out
money.
from Order acceptance to finished
We
product
run about a
is-
5 business day,
Yeah, so we.
which we're not like other appraisal firms. Like my business partner is like a beautiful mind. He could run a factory. So we base everything on production. So we will say no before we jam up our pipeline. So about 5 business days,
Yeah, we could book through the end of next month if we.
but
did our
that's not
business model
good
like that,
business.
But we don't do that.
Yeah.
So we
And then it comes
advertise
down to the
something.
clients that we want to go deep with. So I will,
Time frame for acceptance of the order that's run through the appraisal management company.
There's not,
I
we,
don't know that.
I
so.
think with
they-
VA there might
Oh,
be.
Yeah, VA, so there, that's a lender to lender, AMC to AMC question. So Norman asked if there's a requirement that they accept an order within X number of days or hours. The way our AMC works is whenever we place an order out there, the appraisers have X number of hours to accept the order. If we can't find an appraiser to accept the order, which happens
Yeah.
because they already know their pipeline's too big, they can't take this order, then it'll roll. If we still can't find an appraiser, which happens, we've gotten really good at this process, we will pick up the phone and start making phone calls. We as in the AMC. There are times that we at the branch level, we even make a couple of phone calls and say, hey, we've got an order. We can't get anybody to take it. This is the, hey, and we have really nice realtors on both sides of the transaction, because that matters too.
Yeah.
You guys have reputations the appraisers know about. So if you're a real jerk to work with and they're looking at the contract and they see your name on it and they know that you're a real jerk, they might decline that order. And I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. So you guys, just like sometimes whenever you are looking at all of the houses, all of the 2 houses that you have to show the customer, your buyer, I know you guys look at that and go, oh, last time I did a transaction with them, they were so rude, mean, and hateful. Guess what? We think the same thing. So if you want your orders picked up, you better be nice. Then if we still can't find someone to pick up the order, then we have 2 other AMCs that we work with. So we will place an order if it's a really weird property and a tight timeline. We'll place an order on 3 of our AMCs to see who they can get to pick up an order. That's what it's like right now.
Shotgun approach.
It's shotgun approach. We're working really, really hard to find somebody that we trust, that communicates well and does a good job and does a really clean narrative so we know we can close and fund this transaction on time. And that appraisal piece of that process is such a big part of it.
So with prices going crazy,
Mhm.
and I can only speak for myself, but obviously when I look at comparable sales, I go on a listing appointment, I tell them these are the latest and greatest prices that have all been pumped up through the system. So it doesn't matter what they were asking. These are the real sale prices. Most of them are higher, or at least at full value, what they started out asking. So I always joke and tell them there's two scenarios here. This is the number I would suggest you to list it at that we can defend. If it absolutely has to appraise, and then the market's going to determine what the actual sales price will be, and we would expect that to be higher than this number here. So when you're getting these contracts, what percentage, just off the top of your head, guesstimate, are you seeing that aren't making contract value and they're still going through because people have waived, the contingencies and done some of that documentation?
Question being what percentage, so the question is what percentage of contracts that we're seeing are not making value?
That are over list,
Oh, that are over list?
over list.
Joshua, do you have that percentage?
I would like, so it's increased drastically.
I'd say
in the last 6
30%.
weeks. I'd say, that's not to agree with you, because you said it, but yeah, I'd say probably around. 30%.
About
Around
30%.
Won't make value.
30%.
Yeah,
Which
and-
is-
And that is us exhausting all resources.
Right, I get it.
It's an opinion of value. We work in a range. and I will max that sucker out on the high end, and it still won't make value.
So Norman's question was, if you've got a house that was sold for above list price, what's the percentage of appraisals that don't make value, contract value? And it's about 30% that won't make contract value in that scenario, which is why you're in, getting feedback from you guys that says, hey, I'm concerned about value. I think it might come in, 4 or 5 short. Will you run that scenario by the buyer, make sure that they have the money? Because we'll go in there to our total cost analysis and we'll make some adjustments and say, hey, worst case scenario, this is what we're thinking. Best case scenario, this is what we're thinking, but let's look at something in the middle too and make sure the buyer is still okay.
Just from our perspective, the flip side of that coin is if the house appraises for 15,000 more than we listed it for, shame on us.
Shame on you, you
How
left
did
money on
we-
the table.
How did we make that kind of mistake?
Right,
How did we miss that?
right.
So, we're
Those are-
looking at it from that perspective.
Those are few and far between right now, at least from our desk. Like, I mean,
They're usually an unusual situation.
Like,
The
I can't
realtor's
even-
related to the family.
yeah, it has to be a family,
Yeah.
and usually
Gift
those
of
deals
equity or
go the
whatever.
other way. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, Uncle Sammy's taking. Yeah, so those are few and far between right now.
Those are all great questions. I mean, if Chris is for it, I'll put it on the calendar ahead of, you don't have a calendar. I'll put it on your
That's you go
calendar
to
ahead of.
Josh. I
yeah.
told you.
To do this again at the first of the year, because, this is just such an important part of the process. It's the numbers, and it sets the expectation for the seller. It sets the expectations for the buyer, and it's numbers that come in at the last minute, so it's highly emotional.
And the appraiser's
So-
scratching their head going, what the hell are you people thinking?
Yeah.
It's no way.
Crazy.
So, we do this series twice a year. So if there's some other classes, and I asked this last week, that you guys want to make sure that we cover, you need to give us some feedback on what classes you want. We did have a conversation a couple of weeks ago. Several people had asked for a budgeting class, and several of you guys have asked for social media class. If we're going to do social, I could do social high level, and then we need to really break it down to the different platforms. The platforms that I'm familiar, I use every day that I could teach on is LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. But you guys have also got to get really good at reviews on Google. You've got to be searchable on Google, because that's how people are finding you right now. So that's like 5 or 6 different classes. I'm happy to teach as long as you guys just tell me which one. And if I'm not the expert in that area, I'll find someone who is. So I think that wraps it up. All right, we are past time. Yeah, commercial break. You are very welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Make sure if you're here in person and you want CE that you've signed the roster. The CE credits, if you've done on Eventbrite, we're going to have that information automatically. And Brandy, I know, was taking a roster for you guys online. All right. Y'all have a good day.